We've had a couple of panels already, a wonderful lunch session, and let me tell you, what you're about to see is going to excite you. And if you look up the definition of excite, you know that to be excited can be positive or it can be negative. So you're going to get excited about some bad things regarding energy and environment policy in the United States. But the Texas Public Policy Foundation prides itself in being a source of optimism. And so I think you're going to enjoy what our panelists have to say. I think I know most of you, but if we've not met, I'm Kevin Roberts, the Executive Vice President of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thank you so much for being with us. This is one of those late afternoon sessions at a conference that not only is going to keep you awake, but you're going to want to run out of these doors and take some action. So we can promise that that's going to happen. The title of our session is Life Powered: How Fossil Fuels Impact Life Today. And what we're going to focus on today is a reset campaign of ours. This started as Fueling Freedom and was prompted by this just terrible idea called the Clean Power Plan. We played a role in helping to modify that plan significantly. And what we decided was that as we did some polling and some focus groups, we realized that the problem was much more extensive than just in public policy. The problem extended to schools, both K through 12 schools and higher education. The problem extended to the media. The problem extended to policymakers. And we realized that we needed to be active on all of those fronts. Plus, we also needed our wonderful litigation center at the foundation to feel empowered, shall we say, to take action on this issue. But most of all, if you want to know what the number one goal of Life Powered is, it's to change an incorrect narrative about energy and environment policy. It is to make that narrative one in which every person in this country understands the role that energy plays in their lives, and that they don't think that fossil fuels are bad because we all rely on them. And so whether we're talking about a family in the Rio Grande Valley that owns a business and needs that additional money each month because from their utility bill, because there are fossil fuels providing for that, or we're talking about, as we will see in one of our videos, a family in the developing world that relies on access to abundant, reliable energy. This project is not about schools, it's not about the media, it's not about policy, it's not about attorneys. It's about individual people. And our side needs to tell the story better about the role that fossil fuels play for us, and the role, generally speaking, that abundant, reliable energy plays. Because if we fail in the policymaking arena to tell the story about people, we're going to fail when the time comes to actually enact that policy. So what you're going to hear today from two experts in the field is an assessment of reality now. One of the mantras at the foundation is that we read reality truthfully. So part of that story, as you know and might imagine, is not going to be pretty. But we also want to provide a path to a much brighter future, and a path that's going to provide a much brighter future because only several 100 million people around the world have been lifted out of poverty by having access to abundant, reliable energy. That's the story that we need to tell, not just because Texas is an energy-producing state, but because it is the proper story for human flourishing. And so when you rush out of these doors at the end of this panel, inspired and excited, ready to go to action, let our next step be to tell the proper story about energy, and secondly, that story be on how each of our lives is benefited, is enhanced by access to abundant energy. Let me introduce our two panelists who will come to the stage now. Bernard McNamee is our newest addition to the growing family of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. In good conservative fashion, his first day was yesterday, Ronald Reagan's birthday. Bernie is now our director of the Life Powered Project. He served as Deputy General Counsel for Energy Policy at the U.S. Department of Energy, as recently as earlier this week, as I understand it. He served as Chief of Staff to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, was Senior Domestic Policy Advisor and Counsel to Senator Cruz, and was partner with the national law firm of McGuire Woods, where he practiced energy law for 9 years. His experience also includes serving 3 Virginia Attorneys General in capacities as Chief Deputy Attorney General, Chief Counsel to the Attorney General, and Deputy Attorney General. You can certainly understand why Brooke and I and our entire senior staff believe that Bernie is the right person at the right time to lead this project for the next several years. Welcome aboard, Bernie.
Thanks so much.
We don't want you to sit too often, Bernie, but you're welcome to have a seat now.
Great.
Jason Johnson is owner of J2 Strategies, a political strategy and public affairs firm based right here in Austin. He has 2 decades of experience running campaigns at every level, including as chief strategist of Ted Cruz's 2012 senatorial and 2016 presidential campaigns. As you heard from some of our friends, he's very well known in the circles of political campaign folks. He began his political career in 1998 as co-chairman of Aggies for Rick Perry while attending his alma mater, Texas A&M University. I'll just proceed. Brooke isn't in the room, is she? Okay, good.
No, but I'll tell her.
All right, good company. No, we're happy to have you as part of the team, Jason. In 2002, Jason managed then Texas Supreme Court Justice Greg Abbott's campaign for Attorney General before going on to serve as his chief of staff. Jason and his company have managed over 60 political campaigns, accumulating a 90% win record. A lot of things I could say about Jason, and I would make the same remark about Bernie. Best thing I could say in our professional setting is that he is a movement conservative, a true believer in every sense of that word, and I think you're really going to enjoy what both he and Bernie have for you this afternoon. Thanks for being here, Jason. We're now going to start this panel by showing the first of 2 videos. This will help frame the discussion that Bernie and Jason have for you. And then at the end, they're very happy to take your questions and provide some really good answers. Thanks for being here.
You fly 2.5 hours south of Miami, and it's like you're stepping back in time.
I talk to people now and they're like, oh, I've been to Haiti, I love it. I know exactly what part of the island they've been to because it's the only part of the island that has been made for tourists.
My job was to train locals how to be linemen, how to climb poles, how to make connections, how to get electrons to flow from point A to point B. The end result was running the power into community, energizing those homes for the first times.
Everything that we're able to do every day is fueled by our power. So I couldn't just stay on the phone for hours with my mom crying and venting if I was upset.
I remember Amanda had a picture book that had French to English translations, and there was a washing machine. And our neighbor was at the house, and she looked at the washing machine. She was like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Oh, that's a machine that'll wash your clothes for you." It blew her mind. She couldn't even wrap her head around it. We here in the United States, we're blessed with a depth of natural resources that we can use to power things. And the argument is we shouldn't use those resources, right? We should go back to how folks are living in other parts of the world. That's all fine and dandy, but until you get on a plane and go live that life, I don't want to hear your argument.
I think it's important for others who live in the United States to realize that this is a reality of the majority of the world.
My dream was to take the same service that we have here in the United States and take it to people who've never experienced it before.
Well, I'm glad to be here with you all, and I want to thank Texas Public Policy Foundation for having faith in me and hiring me, Brooke and Kevin and Greg and the whole team. But the reason we've shown you this video and started off is because it really does lay the foundation for what we're about to talk about and what we're about to do as the Life Powered Project. And that is to remind the American people about how important energy is, not only to our quality of life, but to our very existence. That it's just not about money, it's just not about having luxury goods, it's about everything that we are doing. And it's something very important. Now, some of the things you may not have focused on right away when you saw that, but you noticed there were certain things. There was a difference between having a washer and somebody having to scrub their clothes. There's the difference between having to take pails of water and having water at the tap. There's the difference between having clean running sanitation and having sewage go maybe in the street. These are things that we as Americans all seem to take for granted. And people have forgotten how life was just 100 years ago, 200 years ago, really before the energy revolution, which also fueled the industrial revolution, which fueled a revolution in our entire lives. People have forgotten that. And part of what this project is going to be is to try and remind people of that. But we got to realize, why do we want to remind people of that? And that's one of the things that we're also going to have to do. As Kevin likes to say, we have to talk about, there's where we want to go, here's where we are, and here's the path to get there. But let's start with some of the slides. Or perhaps not. There we go, now we'll go back. Right, the Life Powered Project, and we'll go into the details of it. It's a new initiative that TPPF is starting, and what's so important about this is that you all here are getting the sneak preview about what's going to be a major initiative of this organization and really try and change not just the Texans' view of energy, which we know is generally pretty positive, but really change the view of energy throughout the world. Now, in short, this is kind of the mission statement. We're going to reframe the national discussion. But what this is really about is changing the hearts and minds of the American people about what they think about energy and to start believing in it again. Understanding that fossil fuels are not something dirty, something we have to move and get away from, but understand that they are the key not only to our prosperity, but to the quality of life, but also to a clean environment. What do you think powers the sanitation system, the clean water systems, that runs things that clean our air? It's energy. It is 24-hour energy, and it is energy that is produced in a very concentrated source in coal, oil, and natural gas. Now, TPPF, as all of y'all know who've been coming here for years, knows that this is not a new idea that we're dealing with. The Fueling Freedom Project with the Fueling Freedom book that Kathleen Hartnett-White wrote was a very important foundation for what we're doing. It sets the intellectual foundation for what we're trying to do. We also have the Center for America's Future, the litigation arm, which has been going out fighting, whether it's the Endangered Species Act, challenging the Clean Power Plan, using that litigation arm in order to make the case in court about things that are important, to win victories for freedom and to win victories for private property holders. And you'll notice something. That's something the left has been very good at doing. The NRDC, the Natural Resource Defense Fund, the Environmental Defense Fund, they're the ones in court. They're going out there and they're battling and they're making their case in the courts and they're winning. We've started to push back and now we're starting to win. The Clean Power Plan was a great example of that. I had the real honor of, when working for General Paxton, to help lead his team in challenging the Clean Power Plan and the waters of the United States. And then had the even greater pleasure, or I shouldn't say greater, an equal pleasure when I was in the administration under Secretary Perry and President Trump to really see that the Clean Power Plan be put to death. But now we've got those foundations, we need to build on it. And that's what the Life Powered Project's gonna be. And this is where we're going. But what are we up against? There's an organized propaganda campaign against fossil fuels. We all know it, we all see it. The problem is it's taken hold. You talk to millennials, you talk to housewives, you talk to people in corporate boardrooms now. They're all buying into this. or at least they're giving lip service to it. And when you start giving lip service to something and speaking it, you start believing it. And there's a lot of money behind this. You'll see with these increases in the amount of money that has been raised by the traditional green groups, this is just for a short period between the election of President Trump in February of 2017. The election of President Trump and the realization that there was going to be real challenges to the environmental administrative state has just poured money into the other side. And that money isn't just being put into their coffers. They're going to be used against Texas oil producers, natural gas producers. They're going to be put against utilities. They're going to be put against coal miners. They're going to try and wait us out, litigate us out, and they're going to try and return the administrative tyranny that they've been pushing for so long. And what they've been doing is working. You've got towns like Georgetown, north of Austin, that tells their citizens they're going to be on 100% green energy. Well, as we know, the sun doesn't shine all the time, and the wind doesn't blow all the time. Maybe if they had access to real hydro, maybe they could do it. But there isn't 100% renewables. We always know that there's backup of natural gas, coal, or nuclear. In my background, when I used to represent electric and gas utilities, was I had to do integrated resource plans, and I had to really look at how did the grid work. And I can tell you, the grid doesn't work just on renewables. But what's industry's response been? Well, industry has had a number of responses, and they haven't been particularly strong. Sometimes they put up pretty pictures showing, hey, we like animals and we like nature, trying to say, well, you know, see, don't hate us so much. But this isn't making the case. Some of them are saying, well, if we just capitulate and admit that climate change is real, maybe they won't be as hard on us. Or we'll do some advertising and kind of talk about education, and it's kind of reflective. And they have some other initiatives, some education campaigns. But what all this shows you is that there's not an organized defense and an offense saying why it is that fossil fuels, why the energy we use, the energy that produces the American way of life, and a better hope and a better future for people across the world, in Africa, in South America, in Asia, why the better life for all humankind comes from what we have in the ground and what we can produce for cheap, reliable, abundant energy. Now, something that some of y'all may be familiar with is it's not just, you know, college campuses where the kids are being taught about, you know, how evil fossil fuels are and the whole green movement, and it just feels good to say, I'm for the environment. It's going on in the corporate boardrooms, too. There's a process called ESG rating, environmental, social, and governance rating. Any of y'all heard of that? Well, it's coming. We all know about the bond rating agencies in Wall Street. You know, they tell you, are the bonds secure? There's rating agencies that tell you, how are the stocks doing? Well, the left has done a really amazing thing. They now have the environmental, social, really social justice and governance initiative, and they do ratings now. And now it's a thing where investors, on Wall Street, they want to have a good ESG, which means that instead of looking at the bottom line, they're being told to look at, are they environmentally responsible? Are they socially responsible? Is their governance right? And all these things are things to change the habits, the nature of how corporate America is working. It's an amazing thing that when you get people talking about things, thinking about things in a certain way, their behavior changes. And that's why part of the reason we're losing and part of the reason why TPPF wants to do this Life-Powered initiative. Now, we do have groups working to respond to all this. We have industry groups, especially some very good ones here in Texas, but also groups like API at the national level. We have a number of think tanks, TPPF being one of them, but also Heritage and some of the others that you've seen up there. We have some action lobbyist groups that are out there, and then we have some education coalition groups. Now, Life-Powered kind of fits more in that spot. But the thing is, these things, we're not having a campaign. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of good information. There's some work, but there's not a vision, a unifying vision. There's not some solid work and things that Jason's going to talk about that really uses the tools that are used in campaigns and politics in order to win minds, to win hearts, to persuade people about what to do. So our goal is We need to take all those things, all the efforts that the different groups are doing, run it through, and have a campaign that's going to win about energy. Now, I jumped ahead on that a little bit, but one of the key things you got to think about with this is that when we are thinking about how we're going to talk about energy, it can't just be, debating climate change per se. It can't just be about talking about, well, geez, it's more economically efficient to use this or that. Well, we got to use this now, but one day we'll get to renewables as our only resource. We got to believe in our message today. We got to be willing to tell people today that the fuels we have, the blessings we have, and the abundance of fuel that Americans have, that it is something that is good for us, that it's something that provides us affordable, reliable power, that lets us be strong as a nation, and that lets us have a cleaner environment. But I'll also say it means something else, and this is where part of the battle is. It's about freedom. It's about not having the government ration. Part of the reason that we see that the green movement is always talking about more government control is because it's the constant battle between liberty and tyranny. It's about people who want to say, I know what's better for you. It's the thing where groups are saying, I want to be the one in charge, I know what's good for you, and I'm going to ration it. The fracking revolution, the American energy renaissance, has destroyed their model because they were on a path of being able to say, you know what, we got them. We're going to be able to take control of the economy. We're going to be able to take control of the people. We're going to decide who the winner and loser is. And they were thrilled. And you saw the march of government getting stronger and stronger, and the regulatory state growing bigger and bigger, and its crushing of the American spirit getting even more and more crushing and tightening around our necks. But something happened along the way. The ingenuity of the American people came in, and they came up with something where we used to have peak oil, where we now have an abundance of oil, and America is now talking about not just economic independence or oil independence or fuel independence. We're talking about energy dominance, as Secretary Perry likes to say, or as we used to say, Governor Perry. And that is something that's amazing. And this is all about, do we get to control our own destiny? And I'll say one last thing before turning it over to Jason, because he's going to run us through some of the data that he's done. And we got another video that'll kind of express that. But it's also about our ability to be able to show that this isn't about us being selfish. This isn't about us being the greedy capitalists or wanting the money. We believe in this because we know that if we can provide good, cheap energy across the world, you're not going to have people like in Haiti where they're having to just subsist. They're going to be able to have the basic things of life that let us then have the leisure time to move forward, that lets us be able to read the books, to think big thoughts, to let our children do better, to build a better future. That is the humanity of what we're talking about, and that's why we truly believe that our energy future is about furthering the human condition. And that is a message ultimately, if we unite around it and we have faith in our own abilities, we're going to be able to win this. Now, before passing this on to Jason, we have another video that I think will help show you kind of exactly where we're going with this. And the video you're going to see is based on a lot of the data that Jason was able to obtain through his polling and through focus groups. But I think I'll let the video now speak for itself, because I think this is the first in a long number of steps in order to make the case.
Few details there, huh? Well, I've got the luckiest position to go right after that video, you know. So we started last summer, and what you see is one product, one work product, that's the result of a lot of research that we've conducted around the country to gain a better understanding, first of all, of what was the status of opinion about, broadly speaking, the fossil fuel industry, right? Who among the public could be persuaded, and frankly, who among the public really isn't persuadable, which is as important as anything. And as most of the folks in this room know who are, you know, I would say, active in public policy and politics, that group of persuadable individuals is ever shrinking. And for any organization that seeks to change public opinion, knowing who to talk to is just as important as knowing what to say. So with that, I'm going to run through some of the numbers. Some of this you probably won't find too surprising. These are net favorable ratings for each of these sources of energy. And as you can see, the source of energy that had the most positive rating throughout the country was solar. It just feels good, it's warm, right? Followed by wind power, but plus 43, oil and natural gas. This one did surprise me and alarmed me just a bit. Plus 35, the EPA. Nuclear, fossil fuels, oil and gas producers. Note the difference between oil and natural gas at plus 43 and then all the way down only at plus 14 when you add the term producers. What's going on there? Why is that? Followed by offshore drilling, and then we get into real negative territory. Bernie mentioned earlier, and most of you know, the success of the left of branding fracking. You can see right here. Next up, we ask a series of questions, really trying to find out at the beginning of our research, what particular attributes do people most associate with oil and natural gas? This top one, you can see the ellipsis, that actually was, it's better and cleaner than when I was younger. This was a surprise. Strong plurality. There's broad recognition that industry's doing a better job than it used to be. However, number 2 pollutes the environment. 3 creates good jobs. Part of the past, abundant, and last and not least, produced in more innovative ways. I want you to hold on to that 6% of abundance. Remember that. We'll come back to that in a moment. And the part of the past at 9%. So, to our main goal of trying to determine if we're going to have a campaign to change hearts and minds, who should we even talk to, we took several different approaches. One was we built a consistency model to try to establish people's opinions across a spectrum of issues, of course, all related to oil and natural gas. And we asked 3 separate questions. Number 1, as you can see, is the oil and natural gas industry, I'm saying natural every time, even though we didn't. Is the oil and gas industry a net positive or a net negative in your state? Number 2, if you had to choose between a clean environment and a strong economy, which would you choose? And number 3, which viewpoint comes closest to your own regarding global warming or climate change and regulations of CO2? If you'll note, we had version A, version B. We really wanted to know, would we see a difference in response, whether we said climate change or global warming? The answer was no. No difference whatsoever. So we'll go through those responses. Starting with the good news. 49% said, you know what, the oil and gas industry is a net positive to my state. Here again, there's recognition of providing jobs. There's some recognition of the benefits to people's personal lives, but you have 22% who say nope, and then we have a third who are undecided. I'm going to really breeze through these partisan breakdowns as we go because they are very predictable. Of course, Republicans, 68% positive, independents at almost 40, and then Democrats at 38 in the middle. Next, if you had to choose between a clean environment and a strong economy, which would you choose? 39%, a plurality, chose a clean environment. followed by 38% strong economy, 18% other or both. The partisan breakdown here, as you can see, from Republican to Democrat on clean environment, both, excuse me, and a strong economy. Next, which viewpoint comes closest to your own regarding global warming? And what we're really getting at here, you see we're starting to ask specific questions about specific policy issues that we know impact industry, impact the economy. Here, we had 20% say we need fewer regulations. Let's give those people a round of applause, right? Followed by 25% who say, you know what, current regs are sufficient. Think about that a moment. How many people in this room think current regs are sufficient? 44% additional regulations are needed. Additional regulations are needed to combat climate change or global warming by regulating CO2. Partisan breakdown. So, when you take a combination of the responses to those three questions, you put them all together, here's what you get. You had 19% who answered all three of those questions in a way we would consider, pro-fossil fuel, natural gas, et cetera, et cetera. You had 24%, 2 of 3 in a pro way. 23% mixed or unsure. We had your negatives, 3 of 3, 2 of 3, for a total of 34%. When you take the 2 of 3 pro and the mixed and unsure, you add them together, broadly speaking, and it's important to emphasize, this was our starting point with a very wide net. We can consider 47% of voters to be persuadable on issues related to the industry. Now, that can be persuadable as in persuading to our side or to the other side, including those who have 2/3 positive responses. Breakdown partisan again. Now look very carefully at the Republican. You might expect that would be, the 38 would be higher than it is, right? Next, we took all of the data from our survey research and we really wanted to prepare to move from our quantitative into our qualitative research to really start getting to the heart of the videos that Bernie's showed us and some of the comments he made. And so we ran a cluster analysis to fine-tune that 45%. Again, who do we need to talk to? Who's a waste of time to talk to? And these terms, they're pretty self-explanatory. They're not as important as the percentages you see next to them, because then at the end of the day, we've now dropped from 47% being persuadable down to 39%, right? And these two groups, the all of the above moderates and the working class skeptics, are the groups that we really began to focus on when we headed into focus grouping, pun intended. And all of the above moderates, generally speaking, you could say that they're optimistic about oil and natural gas. They don't necessarily have an overall negative opinion. They're more likely to say, yeah, it's a net positive to my state, but they're vulnerable to being persuaded to the other side, because they do believe that CO2 is contributing to climate change, and that's a horrible thing, and therefore we need to add regulations, right? Then we have working class skeptics, tend to be culturally conservative, but underperform, interestingly enough, on the benefits, go back to that video that we just watched, of oil and natural gas to their daily lives. So when you roll all of this together, this was the fun part. There are a few people in this room that participated in this. We had 4 different panels of focus groups, 2 in Atlanta and 2 in Denver. And we really had a wide-ranging discussion with real actual voters that fall into those categories that we just showed you. And starting from the top, we found out that the name of the organization just was wrong. That's where we came away from the feedback and changed the name to Life Powered, right? And so let's start there. Energy powers life, right? The advancement of the human condition. It was actually encouraging, I thought, that there, again, was recognition of that, but really there's been no emphasis on it when we look at different public education campaigns. Reliability right? When you talk about reliability more than affordability, believe it or not, we really connected with people that could be persuaded to the other side. Abundance. Now, go back, and I see a couple of producers in the room. How can it be that you have a negative opinion of fracking, right? But when you talk to voters about abundance, it's a positive thing. Huge disconnect there, which means huge opportunity, by the way. You know, you think about persuasion and, you know, the old informative term paper and persuasive term paper. Frankly, a lot of the work that we have to do, it's exciting because it's truly just informative. It's getting rid of a lot of the bad information that's in the stream. Obviously, the use of the term domestic oil and natural gas, which I was saying earlier, increasingly clean. When we talked about the potential for the economy, export of LNG, et cetera, there was broad recognition there. And then America's future. This is key, because remember, again, those attributes earlier, people really tend to think, even if they have a positive view of oil and natural gas, fossil fuels, hey, you know what? It's part of the past. Even if, and most people are in this position, people don't believe, you know what, we can flip the switch tomorrow and go to windmills and solar panels and all of the above. Even if they don't believe we can do that tomorrow, they say, well, what about next week? Point being, fossil fuels are part of the past. And so long as we continue to allow it to be framed that way, we will be behind the 8 ball, so to speak, and that is something that we must change. It is part of the future, connecting it to the improvement in life through the entire human condition. So last, before I turn it back over to Bernie, just the synopsis, the summary, there absolutely have been things that we have learned in our research that are nuanced, some that are new, but when you put it all together, this is pretty much common sense here, right? Fossil fuels are the problem. That's what the other side has successfully accomplished, right? If you think about it like this, they have attacked our greatest asset. They've turned our greatest asset and attributes, the reality of what fossil fuels have contributed to mankind, and turned it into a liability. We've got to turn that back, right? Part of the past, not the future. As such, it's not innovative, right? Same idea there. And last and certainly not least, the bait and switch, right? Moving from real pollution to CO2. It was amazing to sit in these focus groups and, on one hand, observe a discussion where real people living their lives understand what real pollution is, right? They understand if they're standing behind a diesel bus, whether it's pollution or not, it sure doesn't smell good. Certainly those over the age of 55 have a recollection of some real pollution back in the day, as we say. But it is all merged together now. And the connecting of the dots of CO2 being a pollutant and its contribution to global warming or climate change, back to therefore we must have aggressive federal, state, and local regulations. All of that comes together. And we must take all of those pieces apart as we go forward, be very meticulous in who we talk to, how we are talking to those people, and we'll know a great benefit of that, by the way, for entities like this who only survive off of the generosity of donors. We are being fiscally responsible and efficient with our education campaigns as we do so. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bernie.
Thanks. Thanks, Jason. I was lucky enough to have worked with Jason back when we were both with Senator Cruz in different capacities, and Jason is truly one of the best. His ability to really get at the data and understand what it means and where you need to go with it is invaluable, and TPPF is very lucky to have you in helping us with this. So this comes to taking his data and going for the message. You've heard us mention this a few times, and here's some of what we're going to be pushing as part of the message, as part of the campaign to bring those elements together. We're going to talk about energy amplifies human life. It's the Haiti video versus what we have today, what Americans want to have every day that they take for granted, and that what we deserve tomorrow, what our children deserve tomorrow, and what our grandchildren deserve tomorrow. It also is about what people in the rest of the world deserve. That for these green elites who fly to Davos in their private jets, and they talk about how green they are, and tell somebody in a third world country that they need to live with intermittent electricity, that they can't have reliable power at their hospital, that they may not be able to have light at night or running water or clean water. We need to make the case that ours is the one that cares about the human condition. We care about not only ourselves, but the rest of the world. Same going as with the data, that energy must be reliable and abundant, and America is blessed with both, so long as we take advantage of our natural resources. Next, that, as we were just saying, that oil and natural gas are increasingly clean, which is absolutely true, but they're improving the worldwide environments. This is central in the whole thing about the real pollution versus CO2. When we talk about the real problems in the world with pollution, people are having to burn dung in order to cook, people that maybe burn coal in their small house in order to have warmth. That's real pollution. That's a real threat to people. Whereas we have the capability to provide people with cheap, reliable fuel that will make their lives better. But we need to worry about ourselves too, because if we don't have reliable power like electricity, something, when you hear about renewables, that they can provide all this power, maybe they're 7% of the power. Problem is, what's running the rest of the grid, and what's backup? It's oil, it's gas, it's nuclear, and it's coal. And those are the things that also, by the way, keep the grid at a level frequency and keep the voltage up. People don't know about that, but renewables, when they come on and off, it screws up the whole physics of the grid. So when people want to talk about science, they ought to talk about the physics of the grid and know about what real science is, and that is, how do you keep the lights on? And it's with fossil fuels and nuclear. So back to where we started. We're going to work on getting the coordinated message. TPPF is going to lead. Life Powered is going to lead. I've been given this honor to help lead this fine group of people, to work with all of you, with the donors, with the thought leaders, to try and make sure that we're going to make the case. We're not going to surrender. We're not going to say, well, we care about things too, but we're going to concede the ground because we're ultimately going to lose if we do that. We're going to take the fight to the other side, and we're going to show the American people, remind them of what they already know is true, and that is that the American ability, our ingenuity, our commitment to the human condition, and the abundant, reliable fuels that we have can make America much better, can make America great, and can help the world. So we're going to embrace these things, our path forward. We're going to work on the messaging. We're going to try and help coordinate the groups to the extent we're permitted. We're going to work on rapid response. If there's bad information out there, we're going to jump on it. We're going to be out there, and we're going to have the other side out there. We're not going to concede the ground. And we're going to be working on a nationwide campaign. This is about winning the hearts and minds. And that means we're going to work on end goals. We're going to work to try and push back against CO2 regulations. We're going to work to have that, let the best energy source win. Let's not have subsidies. Let's not have the thumb of the government regulator picking winners and losers, but instead let the people choose, and usually the people choose what works, what's efficient, and what's abundant. And that all feeds into, it's the strong market economy for energy. But all those things have to work together, and all those things then go back to giving people the power over the government, over the bureaucrats, and letting people be able to decide not just their energy future, but their future. Let them make the decisions. So this is Life Powered. We're on the beginning. We're about to take a great big leap forward in this. You're seeing kind of the preview of this. I hope you all will support us with your ideas. Obviously, we're going to need financial support as we move forward, but this is an exciting time because we get to be on the forefront of pushing back and taking back ground and helping ensure a bright future for the American people. And now we'll take some questions. you. Yes, sir. There's a mic coming.
One of the reasons that the left has been so successful is they have used the power of government. I don't see that in your presentation. How are we going to use the power of government to get this message out, in addition to your national campaign?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's part of the challenge that as conservatives we have overall is the left, because they believe in government, they believe in the power of government, that it's always incremental steps, and they'll use that as the voice. Because we believe in limited government, we don't use the same tools, and we're at a disadvantage. But that's why the campaign's so important. The reason the left achieves what they achieve is not just because of the government. It's because they win the culture war. They change the minds and the hearts of the people, and that lets government move forward. That gets politicians saying, hey, we get to do this too. So yes, we're going to be at a certain disadvantage, but I've got faith that the American people, they hear the message, they'll push back, and then politicians will start saying, hey, this is a message that works. Now, we will have one aspect of government in this, or two aspects, I should say. One is in the courts. The Center for American Future is very active in helping push against these laws and regulations. That's one aspect of pushing it back against the regulatory state. We also have great leaders like General Paxton, who has never hesitated to go out and challenge the federal government. So it's kind of like pushing against them there. Then we also have ideas that we can implement. You know, when we're pushing free market ideas, pulling back government, we're able to have policies that help let these things flourish. So I think you're right. There's a certain inherent disadvantage of where we stand, but at the same time, I have complete faith that we can win on that, because ultimately our freedom relies on it, and the well-being of the American people relies on it.
Add just one thing, you know, that dynamic of the other side using the government, right? So obviously our philosophy is we want the people to influence government, right? They're using the government to influence the people, right? Well, we can't change that dynamic unless we impact public opinion, right? So there's the outside education campaign, but importantly, and I'm not an energy expert, right? But I try to keep up. A part of it on, I guess you could consider it a use of the government, would be pulling back agencies, public relations campaigns funded by the taxpayers, right, to influence. So that's a part of it. And then the second piece, and you know, we just hit highlights here, is when I was talking about in the polling, you know, who out in the general public is persuadable, what we didn't talk about is what are the leverage points, if you will, who are the influencers, which includes elected officials, which do include bureaucrats, lobbyists, staffers, other think tanks, other advocacy organizations. So to the extent that we can take the great messaging work that we're doing and influence influencers, I think that's a part of the equation as well.
Yes, sir, right there.
Yes, one of the most indoctrinated groups of the American public opinion that you're trying to change is coming out of the elementary and high schools. What part of your initiative is going to be directed to do something about that?
I think you're absolutely right, and we need to focus on that. And that's something I know that's been talked about, but we have not developed the plan for that. And that's something I think you're absolutely right. We need to focus about and figure out how to get that counter message, because, you know, these are, you know, I know even my son, I just have told, you know, when you're in school, just deny it. I don't care if you get an F, I don't care. And I'm proud of him because he has not made a lot of friends with certain people, but boy, is he outspoken on it. So.
I got to explain to my son the other day that Bill Nye is not actually a science guy.
Oh, exactly. I had the same conversation. My son mocked the teacher for for showing a video by him. It was fantastic.
It's a big thing. I mean, it really, Bill Nye, he's everywhere.
So, but you're absolutely right. To be serious, that is something we have to focus on, and we have not gotten to that step, but it is part of what we know we have to do.
Maybe I missed it, but what are your plans as far as what media you're going to use and what approach?
About the media plan? Obviously, we're at the beginning stages of it, and part of it's going to be, I hate to say this, but part of it's going to be driven by funding. You can do certain things on social media, and push out messages and get that out. As we develop, maybe we'll be able to take that media platform farther. It's also going to be working, as Jason just mentioned, working with, a first wave is going to have to be with the actual decision makers, getting with, whether it's the lobbyists, the corporate boardrooms, the traditional, journalistic media, trying to get our message out at a more low level or indirectly by, getting put on panels, by showing up, if possible on TV, getting that. So one's going to be the earned media aspect of it. Some of it's going to be low-level social media, and then next steps, are going to depend on, where we're able to take it.
Well, one thing that when we were doing our initial research and actually driving towards answering that question, of course, that hit me, and I think it was during a focus group, was when you take all of the impressions that people have of oil, natural gas, fossil fuels in general, it really, it's a utility, right? These things they're like classic utilities. I turn the light switch on, and I really don't think about it unless it works. So what does that mean? It means there's a vacuum. So when a Deepwater Horizon happens, or an Exxon Valdez happens, they disproportionately impact opinion, right? Or if suddenly gas prices go up. So a real important piece of it before we get to the point of literally spending money to advertise, because we could go change public opinion in a state or in a region or even nationwide with the right amount of money, but it would be temporary unless we address these fundamentals. Going back to the education question, the policymakers, the staffers, and importantly, I think because of that vacuum, being a resource as an organization for everyone who, when the next tragedy happens or the next huge policy debate on energy occurs, being a resource of data, of facts, and persuasive messaging to feed out to all of the different people, I think is a very important part of the equation as well.
Thanks. You talked, Roman Buehler with Madison Coalition, you talked about people fighting back against the bureaucratic state and curbing regulators. And I wonder, in Congress, every Republican voted for a bill called the REINS Act, which would require that Congress approve major new federal regulations. And the Republican platform and a unanimous vote of the RNC with the approval of the White House is for a constitutional version of that called the Regulation Freedom Amendment. How do you see these legislative efforts for curbing bureaucrats playing into this effort so we can frame it as the bureaucrats want to take your choice away and we're for the people, doing what's best for them?
Obviously, things like the REINS Act, things like the constitutional amendment on having, the Congress have to approve regulations are obviously important tools to making sure that we're able to secure these wins. And there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg with it, right? Because, you got to make the case and make it so elected officials want to vote for it, whether it's the REINS Act or whether it's a constitutional amendment. And so it's making the case on the fundamentals. It's what the left does so well. They talk about the issues and the end result, not process. Our side has often focused on process first and not what are we trying to fix. And I know you've been very good at working on what are we trying to fix. And so those are tools that will help secure the victories, but we have to make the case, and that's what Life Powered is going to be about. Yes, sir. And then next back there. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you over there.
Thank you. It looks like a great program, but right now you're practically preaching to the choir in this one.
Yep.
How is this going to play in Peoria?
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's why we have Jason here, because, as he pointed out, there's the people who already believe, I'm going to switch it to you, but there's those who are persuadable, and we need to work on that.
Sure. So in Peoria, if you will, I can give a little more detail on the groups just demographically. So first of all, no surprise to you, I'm sure we have a huge challenge with millennials, right? But there are portions, buckets, segments, if you will, within millennials that are persuadable. We see huge opportunity with African American females, with Hispanic females. If you go back and look at the working class skeptics groups and the all of the above moderates, you see a lot of different demographic groups falling within and actually persuadable. But preaching to the choir, while there's no doubt that this group is the best choir that there's ever been, it's not the case that everyone in the choir always sings in tune. And so that's also a part of the equation, which we didn't get into a lot of details today, but make sure that this powerful choir here and other organizations' choirs, we're all harmonizing, if you will, and we're not even to that point yet.
Okay, last two questions.
Meg Wilson, my father helped invent polyethylene, so I get plastic. I heard about it my whole life.
Neat.
But I think there's a disconnect in your message. Your second video is all about the feedstock issues as opposed to direct power. And yet your message is all about direct power. We could have 100% of our power provided by solar and whatever else, but we still are going to produce plastics. We're still going to produce all those other materials, and that is a field full of innovation. And I think you have a disconnect in your message because you're not helping people understand that move from energy production to product, as well as energy production to use of energy in the home, et cetera. And I think you need to think about that carefully because I think it would play really well with a number of the groups that you're talking about.
I think that's a very good point, and we do need to talk about things like that. When you talk about the iPhone, the plastic or aluminum, how did it get there? The earbuds, where did that plastic? So I absolutely agree. We need to make that message very broad. I think that's part of what the video was trying to get at as well. But I absolutely agree.
It has to be a parallel to some other pieces.
I think you're absolutely right.
Is it fossil fuel or is it a natural process of the earth? As we drill deeper and you see, and we learn to produce a lot more formations and other things, which is it? Okay, you see more and more reference to source rock. So, and I don't know what the current theories are, but one of the current theories that might be that all the oil and gas used so far has been what's escaped from source rock.
I didn't hear that last part. I'm sorry.
Okay, one theory is that all the oil and gas used so far in the history of the world is really what's escaped from source rock.
Gotcha.
And it may be a natural process of the earth, okay?
And we've heard that, and the key thing is, I guess you're ultimately going to the issue, which is kind of the Malthusian. Are we running out and therefore we have to stop using it for some reason or ration it? And, that's been the theory, I'm gonna speak a little bit longer than I probably should, but it seems to be on so many things, the left thinks linearly, in a linear manner, that there's only a finite amount of money. So if government needs more money, raise taxes and you'll get more money, and they never understand why then the tax revenue goes down. Same thing with food. They think there's a limited amount of food that can be produced, and therefore you got to either limit population or you're not going to have enough food. And then with fossil fuels, there's only a limited amount, and there you can't have it. And yet human ingenuity has solved all those problems. The Malthusian trap never seems to come true. And do you know why? Mainly because we had access to energy. We were able to farm more land. We were able to do fertilizer. Everybody thought we were at peak oil or peak gas. Technology produced it. And so maybe the earth is producing it itself. I'm not a scientist, or maybe there's just a lot in there and we've just found better ways to do it. But either way, human ingenuity should not be discounted. And we as conservatives have faith in human ingenuity and realize that there's no problem we can't tackle and no problem we can't win. And we're going to win this problem.
I think we have time for just one more, and we got to.
Hearing you is pretty difficult on this part of the building, so forgive me if I'm repeating, but maybe it's worth repeating. I understand that from kindergarten through doctorate, you've got extremely high percentage of left-wing professors, teachers, and they are educating our children. And I don't have an easy way to reach them, but it's got to be very high on the priority list.
Agreed. And I think that's been expressed as well, is that we realize that we need to have an education component of this because, if we don't win the hearts and minds early, we're not going to win them when they're voters. And I think you're absolutely right. We've got to have an approach on that. So thank you. Well, appreciate y'all's time. Jason, thank you so much. But most importantly, we want your ideas. This is the beginning. Education ideas, making sure we're talking about the feedstocks that give us so many other things, the abundant resources. I want your ideas. We want your ideas. And, together with your help, both from financially, but the ideas, the messaging, together we can win this fight. But it's one we got to fight, and it's one we got to make sure that we don't just cede the field to the other side. So thank you, everybody, very much.